So what I'm going to talk about today, I think I've got about 20 minutes for it, is building the next generation of electrical engineers. The session originally was simply subtitled, "How do we entice young people to choose this ever-rewarding career?" I insisted adding the empowering bit. On reflection, maybe I should have used something slightly less pretentious like enabling. I mean, really the thrust of what I'm saying is that a lot of the discussion that goes on within industry about skill shortages, a lot of it tends to focus in on the external environment, the external obstacles. I think the main thrust of what I'm going to say today is we should really look to ourselves a bit more. Many of the barriers are actually self-imposed. Now, the drawback of taking that view, of course, is that rather than pointing the finger outwards, we have to start looking a little bit inwards. The encouraging thing, though, of course, is that we can actually do something about it. So what is the need? Why are we talking about this? Well, I think the two charts here from McKinsey's kind of illustrate the issue. Probably no great surprises. In transport over a period up to 2050, electricity is effectively replacing oil, and likewise with regard to buildings, electricity replacing gas. Yeah, there's a little bit of hydrogen and ammonia there, but really very little in comparison to electricity. Electricity, as they say, really is the future. Do we know where we're starting from? Up to a point. I mean, the first thing to say about this slide, of course, is that I'm taking a very broad view of what an electrical engineer is. I'm not restricting myself just to people who are engineering council type engineers. I'm looking at the whole electrically skilled and knowledgeable workforce. Obviously, electricians are a much larger number than electrical engineers. One other observation to make is the fluctuation in the numbers. It is really difficult to pin down actual numbers. You see, they vary from year to year, according to the Office for National Statistics. Are there enough? Is that enough? Difficult to say objectively, but I think anecdotally, we all know the answer. Just a couple of examples. This example from a survey that my own organisation was involved with, along with some other trade bodies. 42% of engineering services contractors reported labour shortages, skills shortages as their main business concern. And that's been creeping up now for the best part of a year. Another recently published report, this time from Engineering UK. I mean, there is a broader engineering skill shortage in the UK. Again, I don't think I'm telling anybody anything they don't know. 25% of job postings recorded in this report, 25% of job postings, all job postings are actually engineering vacancies. When you break it down to electrical, 1.5% of all job postings across the UK are electrical. You might think to yourself, well, that's relatively modest. But on the other hand, that electrically skilled workforce, those engineers, those electricians, they amount only to 0.4% of the total current workforce. So that's already 4 times, if you like, inflation. And of course, the other factor to take into account is that the vast majority of engineering services firms are actually small and micro. 99.3% of engineering services firms are small and micro, and probably only a minority of them actually publish job postings. They recruit by other means. So I think that 1.5% is probably a gross underestimate in terms of the overall scale of the issue. The Engineering UK report, also very interesting, predicts a year-on-year growth for the electrically skilled workforce, the demand for the electrically skilled workforce of 2.5% a year. So, I mean, what does that mean in actual numbers? Very difficult, again, to pin down. The CITB, Construction Industry Training Board, they've had a little bit of a punt at that. Obviously, our area is not really within their scope, and I would say the numbers here are probably an underestimate. So looking at the bottom category first, electrical trades, we at ECA, along with the Electrotechnical Skills Partnership, which is the sort of collective skills body for the sector, we actually think that the shortfall in recruitment is more like 5,000. So that 3,500 from the Construction Industry Training Board is not saying we need 3,500 new recruits a year. They're saying we need 3,500 new recruits on top of the people that we're recruiting at the moment. On average, In England, probably 5,500 apprentice starts a year, electrical apprentice starts, pretty impressive compared to other disciplines. It's nowhere near enough. We need something more like 10,000. Across the UK as a whole, probably 12,000. Electrical engineers are sort of hidden in that construction professionals and technical staff, but with a little bit of working out, I would say that the CITB view of the world is probably about 1,000 electrical engineers, electrical engineering recruits short a year. I suspect the true figure is nearer to 1,500, 2,000. There's another aspect to this, which is the local dimension. Electrically skilled people are not evenly distributed around the country. This table is a product of some work that ECA has been doing with local skills improvement plans. And what we did with the assistance of JTL, the apprenticeship training charity, is we worked out what the share of the total workforce in each of the 38 local skills improvement plan areas is, what proportion is accounted for by electricians. So what you've got there is Dorset, one person in Dorset out of every 153 is an electrician. By contrast, the figure for Surrey and North Hampshire, one electrician for every 746 people. Now, I'm not saying whether that's the right number or the wrong number for those particular areas, but it does at least start to ask some questions. So what are we going to do about it? We do need to grow, but what we can do? And as I said at the beginning, I think it's as much about breaking down barriers that are, to a certain extent, of our own making. And the first of those is breaking down the barriers between trades and professionals. I mean, the reality is that we need to make better use of the people that we've already got. As I said, there are far more electricians than there are electrical engineers. And certainly in other countries, such as Germany, for example, it is a hell of a lot easier to progress from trades into the professions. There isn't such a barrier, there isn't such a gap, if you like, a gulf between the two. The reality is the electrical apprenticeship, all the electrical apprenticeships, have a very high degree of technical content, which then individuals can develop further with experience, CPD and upskilling. So there should be far more people making that transition than currently is the case. Why is that? Well, for your summer reading, I would strongly recommend David Goodhart's book, Head, Hand, Heart. It's some reflections on some of those barriers, some of those boundaries that exist within culture, within our culture, within our society, including the boundary between trades, the people who supposedly work with their hands, and professions, the people who supposedly work with their heads. Of course, as we all know, electricians in practice work with both. I mean, another factor, and this is shifting, thankfully, but another factor in that barrier between trades and professions is that the professions have professional status, and that actually has some legal consequences. You get chartered institutions and chartered professionals, you have protection of title, you have license to practice. That is very much in contrast with the situation for most trades, including electrical. Yes, we do have some level of regulation, Part P and so on, but in reality, most of the trades have been pushed down into a race to the bottom. That is, as I said, shifting. In Scotland, there's quite a successful campaign running for protection of title for electricians. And I think in England, albeit not in such a direct way, I think all the work around competence off the back of Grenfell, that is pushing us in a similar direction towards a de facto, if not a de jure, license to practice. And you can see this happening within our own sector with the changes over recent years to the electrotechnical assessment specification, which is becoming a lot tighter in terms of the qualifications of qualified supervisors, and indeed being a lot tighter about ensuring the competence of the broader workforce. More barriers, career progression. A lot of people, all they want to do and all they need to do once they qualify is just carry on being great electricians. We need to make it easier for other people who have other ambitions to do so. And to be fair, there are the opportunities now that perhaps there haven't been for a while. On the screen, you'll see just a selection of higher level apprenticeships available in England, in our area, both at level 4, so the level just above the level 3 apprenticeship, so it's technician level, if you like, the Eng Tech level, and then moving up to site management, design, and so on. There's even a level 6 degree apprenticeship. Level 6 means a degree apprenticeship. There are level 6 degree apprenticeships in electromechanical engineering. And this isn't just in England. In Wales as well, they're starting to look at degree apprenticeships. All of this is funded, and of course now no age limits when it comes to doing an apprenticeship. Barriers, more barriers. Barriers between industry and education. I talked earlier about the sort of comforting myths. And one of the comforting myths we have is that there aren't enough people who want to join the industry. I would say that is a myth. You just have to look at the number of people who try to join the industry but can't join the industry using one of the main routes, which is the apprenticeship. Basically, there aren't enough apprenticeship places. As I said before, we really need 10,000 starts a year in England, 12,000 across the UK. We're doing well last year to get 7,500. If you look at the table below, which is the total number of enrolments onto full-time college courses, so full-time provision without work experience, you can see that the numbers there are consistently 3 to 4 times higher. And then the final table really is pretty damning in that it demonstrates that the ability of people to progress from full-time provision into an electrical apprenticeship is actually very, very low. In many cases, below 10%. There's an awful lot of waste in the system. Where do those people go if they don't join the industry? But the short answer is we don't know. We don't know. And it is a consequence of a number of flaws, one of which are the weak links between industry and education. And there are plenty of opportunities, a couple of organizations that do flag up those opportunities. TESP on the left, I've mentioned them already. They have an industry into education campaign. You've also got the various initiatives of the IET, and there are ample opportunities for businesses to get more involved. Obviously, a big thing is we need more employers to take on more apprentices or trainees, graduate trainees indeed. But there's plenty of other things that industry needs to do to improve the quality and the fit for purposeness, if you like, of what education delivers. Visits, information events, offering work experience, contributing to curriculum materials, equipment. Indeed, contributing to teaching or assessing either part-time or full-time. You know, there are companies who are leading the way in this. ECA, one of our member companies in Oxfordshire, they actually give their employees time off, paid time off, to do this thing. If industry wants the education system to reflect more what industry wants, then it needs to get more involved. We're not purchasing, you know, a packet of sausages. We're purchasing something that's a lot more complex than that, and so we need to be a lot more hands-on. T-levels, that's a potential opportunity which I'll come to in more detail later. If I were to sort of show, in contrast to our own current situation, an example of best practice, I'd probably point to Norway. Quite a complicated diagram on the right-hand side, but the basic gist of this is that the Norwegian system doesn't have those barriers. There aren't those barriers between general education and technical education. There aren't those barriers between trades and professions. There aren't those barriers between full-time provision and work-based apprenticeship provision. In fact, what the Norwegian system offers is different entry points and different exit points, but they're all integrated. And although it looks complicated compared to, you know, the situation that we deal with over here, it's pretty straightforward, and it works. It does, though, depend on close ties between industry and education. And of course, it does also depend on proper long-term funding. So apologies to anybody from further education who's sort of screaming at the screen at the moment as they listen to me. I'm not pointing the finger at FE. I think there's lots that we need to do together. And I think probably one of the things that the industry and education can definitely do is then together go to government and say, if you want a world-class technical education system, which you keep on saying that you want, you need to fund it properly. All right, I mean, on the plus side, I do believe that there is the possibility of T levels being there to enhance the existing apprenticeship provision. T levels don't replace apprenticeships. I would say they provide another potential route into an apprenticeship, or indeed into higher education. So T levels are potentially a route in for people into electrical trades, but also I would say into electrical professions. And I mean, what are they? They're effectively replacing the existing full-time provision. The funding of those full-time courses that I've been somewhat critical about earlier, that funding is going in England by 2025. T levels are slowly rolling out, and the USP for T levels is that they include a mandatory work experience element. So effectively, the link in to industry. And that potentially makes them more attractive. I've listed down on the slide a few other reasons why there might be some value in T levels, both from the perspective of the individual and business. But for me, the greatest value is, I think, hopefully it will start to reduce that waste that I talked about earlier. That there is a mechanism for people who maybe for whatever reason don't start at 16, 17 at an apprenticeship. If there is the possibility for them to move into an apprenticeship or to move into higher education without just being lost. But, and this is the important element, that work experience placement is with an employer. It's 300 odd hours, and that is a challenge for sectors like ours, where, as I said, a large number of employers are actually SMEs. But it's certainly a challenge that we at ECA and others within industry are looking to meet, and potentially a great opportunity for the future. Just also to mention, very similar sorts of developments in Wales. I can't go into the detail there isn't time, but there is definitely in Wales a move to integrate full-time provision and work-based provision apprenticeships much better, so that there are again multiple entry points, which hopefully will mean eventually we will get larger numbers of people coming through. Final couple of slides. I haven't mentioned diversity and inclusion up till now, but I will do so now. I do think the industry is missing out on large numbers of people, whether that be women, whether that be Black, Asian, minority, ethnic origin people, or other underrepresented parts of the community. What I would say, and I'm going to be a little bit controversial here, I do think we do need to get away from fragmented initiatives, which are as much about particular organisations projecting and looking good, rather than focusing on results. And I do think we need to be a lot more joined up. I think we can look over the Atlantic. I've been looking to Europe so far, but now I'm switching. I'm looking over to the Atlantic. In America and in Canada, they've been a lot more successful in boosting the numbers of women entering the construction engineering industries. That chart on the right-hand side, looking at the blue, that shows a doubling in the space of less than 10 years of the proportion of women apprentices, construction and related apprentices in Massachusetts. I do believe in other parts of America and Canada, you're now getting up to levels of 15%. Now, again, I don't have the time to go into the detail of that, but what it is a joined up, results-based, multi-organizational collaboration, which supports people from the very beginning of their journey through to qualifying and then going beyond qualifying and progressing in their careers. That's the sort of joined up exercise involving everybody, with everybody bringing something to the table. But at the moment, with these rather sort of single organization focused, hit and miss, here today, gone tomorrow sorts of initiatives, we need to move away from that. And finally, I think that theme of collaboration, I think of breaking down barriers between industry bodies, industry organizations, I think it has a broader application than just to diversity and inclusion. I do think there is an opportunity to work together to promote this fantastic industry and the opportunities there are. But by doing so collectively, we speak with a single voice, and we can probably spend a bit more money on it as well. A good example, and there's a YouTube link there, Denmark. In many ways, they've got it a lot easier than us because it's a very small country and your money goes a fair bit further. But they've had a very successful campaign over a number of years. And as you can see from the chart, the upturn in terms of apprenticeship take-up has been truly impressive. And as I said before, that's the sort of level increase that we need to achieve, whether that be at the trades level or at the professions level. And I think we're going to have a much more impact if we can do that together, rather than all sorts of different organisations competing. One final point, which I missed out from the previous slide, but I will come back to. In terms of attracting, in terms of retaining, a lot of the stuff I was talking about earlier, in terms of making training accessible, giving professional status, professional standing to everybody in the industry who deserves it, and offering career progression opportunities, they are actually also a major part of improving attractiveness to women, to people from Black, Asian, minority ethnic origin, and indeed to everybody. And so all of this does join together, and I think what we all need to do is join together and really treat this as a strategic priority, both for the industry, our individual organisations, and let's face it, the country as well, because we've got a big job to do, and we really do need more people to do it. And with that, that's me.
Perfect. Thank you, Andrew. That highlighted such a key issue for the industry. And we're going to open it to the floor in terms of if anyone has a question, please put in the Q&A box your question, and I'll ask Andrew. But first, I just want to, you mentioned in your report that the situation appears to be getting worse. The skill shortage is pretty dire at the moment. What's an immediate step that these companies can take to ensure they protect their business?
I would say that there is no substitute to training your own. Effectively, the situation, and I apologise to people with a more professional focus, because I'm with a trade body, and so I generally know more about trade issues than professional issues. Essentially, what we're facing is that we really need, at any one time, 20% of the electrical workforce to be apprentices. That's where I get the 10,000 from for England. We basically 200,000 electricians. We need 20,000 at any one time. We need 40,000 apprentices, so 10,000 a year, 4-year apprenticeship. In Scotland, they regularly maintain a figure of 23 to 24%. What that means in practice is that on average, every company needs to be recruiting around 5% of the equivalent of 5% of their workforce every year. There are plenty of companies who do that. Some of the arguments against are, well, people drop out. They do if you don't recruit them properly. If you have a sort of an informal recruitment process that doesn't properly assess whether people actually want to do the role, whether they've got the aptitude for it, then of course you're going to lose people. And I mean, that's one of the potential benefits of the T levels, because there is this element with the T levels of acting as a bit of a filter, because it is kind of a proving ground for people. If you stay the course for 2 years on the T level, if you do a good job in a work experience placement, chances are you're going to stick the course. So that's why I think the sort of multi-track approach with T levels and apprenticeships is a positive one, and one that has some good parallels in terms of what's going on in Norway. I say one of the arguments is dropout. The other argument is, of course, well, some of them will always leave. You're basically training up your competitors. Yes, some of them will leave, but some of them will stay. And the companies that are the most successful, they say, yeah, we factor in the fact that we're going to lose people, but overall, the benefit that training our own brings to the business is incalculably greater. So, as I said, there are some great training companies out there. There are quite a few companies that don't have such a great track record. We need to bring the latter group up to the same level as the former. Lots of opportunities. I mean, just one final thing, Jordan, to be aware of. Traditionally, in our sector, most of the training has been for those companies operating in the sort of industrial and commercial kind of market.
Yeah.
And the domestic market has been a bit of a black hole as far as apprenticeship training is concerned. There is now a dedicated domestic electrician apprenticeship. And that's a little bit controversial with some people, but for me, if that apprenticeship leads to a significant contribution to the increase in the overall numbers that I've described, then it's done its job. And it is providing an opportunity for people in that domestic marketplace to invest in their future workforce in exactly the same way as those companies with more industrial and commercial bias have done in the past.
And I know you mentioned that domestic has less of a training path in terms of apprenticeships, but do you think that domestic electricians could also be a great opportunity? It was a question here from John H. That given there are larger numbers of domestic electricians, could it be a good opportunity to, sorry, it was Howard Gospel that asked this question. Could it be a good opportunity to move the domestic people, upskill them into being able to do the larger jobs that potentially they didn't train for originally?
I think everybody wins. I mean, the other element of the domestic route is just going back to that diversity point. When we talk about diversity and inclusion, people often talk about school leavers. There is massive interest in trade occupations from women career changers. And it is very difficult for them, as it is for other career changers, to break into the industry. So one thing I haven't talked about at all is the whole issue of older people, adult learners. And we could spend another 25 minutes talking about that, but I know we don't have the time. But that domestic route is particularly attractive, particularly maybe to single parents or indeed to people, women looking to, if you like, upgrade their pay, their earnings potential. And so that is an important aspect. Yes, I mean, Howard's point about the domestic electrician. Yes, I mean, the gap, thanks to that domestic apprenticeship, providing it gets the start over time, that's going to build up a qualified workforce where the gap, the delta between, if you like, the domestic skill set and the industrial and commercial skill set is narrower. There does still need to be additional training, a bridging course. I mean, the domestic apprenticeship's 3 years. The main apprenticeship remains 4 years. There would need to be further work, further training, further assessment. But yes, I think it does increase that potential. And to be honest with you, the fewer barriers we have, and that could include people diversifying from industrial and commercial into domestic. The fewer the barriers, the better.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know we're running out of time, so I just want to get to John H's question, which was, could anything be done to influence people moving to deal with regional imbalances? So say you have a lot of electrical engineers, say in Dorset, could there be anything done to entice those to move to, say, Sussex, which might have a lower amount?
Dorset's a lovely place. So is Sussex. I think this is what's quite exciting about the devolution of policy in these areas in employment and skills. Obviously, local skills improvement plans are a small part of that, but of course, increasingly, and not just now in the big urban centres elsewhere, we're seeing more powers, more decision-making powers, more funding decisions being devolved down to people like Andy Burnham and so on. I do think that does provide an opportunity for different parts of the country to think more strategically. I can't answer John's question directly, but I think now that we've got visibility on what some of the issues are locally, and those figures that I shared with you, that I mean, thanks to JTL for the research which helped us sort of develop those. I think data is essential for just a starting point of a conversation. I think that's the first time, certainly I've seen data at that level of granularity. We can now start to have the conversation. Although, as I said, I think Dorset's a lovely place.
Yeah, it is. Just real quick, I know we are technically out of time, but I just want to get to this last question, which are, you highlighted many frustrations, but what is the area, in as quickly as you can, what is the one area that you think will drive the biggest impact?
I think what we've got on our side is I think people can see the opportunities. We'll have frustrations. I hope I haven't come across as too frustrated. Maybe I need to move to Dorset and relax a bit. But I think people see the opportunities, and I think that's giving people confidence. There could be more confidence, and I'm sure you've got to talk a bit later on about the UK being more ambitious in this area. I think there's a lot the government can do. And I've been deliberately shying away from government as much as possible with my talk, but there's a lot the government can do to improve confidence. But I think overall, even though the world's not perfect and everything's always difficult, I think the optimism is there. And I can see in those numbers, 7,500 starts last year, it's only slightly down on that this year. So this is way above the average over the last 10 years. I think people are seeing opportunities with things like domestic electrician, with things like T levels. I think that there is a good chance that people will seize those opportunities, and we will actually be able to achieve at least something towards what the aspirations are.
It's good to see some optimism. Thank you for joining us, Andrew. You highlighted such a key issue for the industry, and we do really appreciate your insight.